FACENT, or factual entertainment, can be one of the most lucrative parts of the media composition canon. Basically, from a little documentary about Skaeltrix enthusiasts shown at 1 o'clock in the morning on BBC Two, my first gig, turns out Skaeltrix is massive in Jamaica. Anyway, all the way up to David Attenborough, probably the biggest job you can get in television. And why is it so lucrative? Now, if you were to do something like Downton, absolutely fantastic, you're doing really well. But if you think about it, it's shown just 1 day a week for a season of maybe 6 to 8 episodes. Whereas factual entertainment, well, something like The Great British Menu shows every day for an hour, wall-to-wall music for week after week after week. A lot of FACENT is made just with library music, so it's the editor just simply putting stuff from music libraries into the edit. Some factual entertainment can be commissioned, like the David Attenborough, but most factual entertainment uses a combination of both, to a point that you'll probably not realise what's actually been written to picture and what is simply library music or synchronised music. So much so, many people think that this piece of music is not actually written by this guy, but indeed my friend Drew Masters, who writes the score for The Apprentice. FACENT starts people's careers, it sustains people's careers. It certainly did mine. And the thing I've said often on this vlog is very little of what we do as media composers is actually compose. We're a head of department, and the reason we're hired is because of the experience that we've earned. And it's difficult to gain that experience when there's no material out there to work to. So what I thought I'd do today and in the next episode of this in a week's time is give you the opportunity of the experience of writing to picture, not just the physical act of putting music to picture, but the challenges of working with a director and when a lock is unlocked. So it turns out I actually make FACENT, albeit for my piddly YouTube channel. But in the summer of last year, I tried not to be piddly and went big budget, dropping a whole chunk of change, dropping a piano from a crane. Thing is, it didn't so much as flop, it kind of pootled. So I'm going to do what any right-minded director would do and blame. I'm going to blame the music and fire the composer, which is me, and work with you to rescore it. And a group of students from Edinburgh College, which has arguably one of the best music departments in the UK, if not Europe. Whilst this isn't live ammunition training, it should give you a sense of what it's like, the challenges writing FACENT. So in the video description down below is a link to a pack of stuff for you to download and work to. I'll take you through how I work with it in Logic, but it'll work in any DAW, Ableton, Cubase, Pro Tools. Right, let's meet the students. So I'm joined by members of Edinburgh College. Are you all on different courses, or is it just this one course, Alan?
It's different years of the same course, so they're all sound production students.
Great stuff. Now, I think it would be really helpful for me, just so I can temper the way I'm going with this tutorial, is could I have a hands up for everyone who uses Logic as their primary DAW? Okay, most of you. And then is Pro Tools for the rest of you? Right, okay. Ah, yes, I can see your backdrop. And then any Cubase users? No, it's quite extraordinary. When I go to Japan, it's all Cubase, no Logic users at all. I'm a composer, but also in a weird kind of way, I'm a director as well. I make YouTube videos. I last year made a YouTube video that had a really big budget. I think it was about 15,000 quid. And what we did is we dropped a piano and it was all high production values, this, that and the other. And the video flopped. So what I'm going to do is split my personality in two, and the director half of me is going to fire the composer half. I'm going to blame what a lot of people blame on kind of flops or poor performing previews is the music. So what I'm going to suggest is that we rescore this video and try and improve it. So what I'm going to provide for you is a download pack of assets, which will be the assets that you would get from an edit, from which to score to picture. And we're going to do this in two parts. So I'm going to start this week with a stage called spotting. which is where you spot at which points we want to have music, and I will give you a brief. And then next week, once you've delivered it, you're going to experience what it's really like to work writing music to picture. Now, music to picture is divided up into cues or starts. These are basically anything from a sting to a 15-minute action sequence. They can be diegetic music, i.e. say me playing a piano, needle drops, say a bit of James Brown that you've licensed to put on your factual entertainment, or indeed commissioned pieces. A spotting session works out where the music starts, where the music stops, and what the music should do, what's its purpose, what's the objective of the score there. Often, things are edited with what's called a temp score, temporary music, and this is the opportunity for the director to talk with you about what they like and what they don't like about the temp score, what is working and what isn't working about it. But also the spotting session is an opportunity for the composer to watch the whole piece and possibly suggest moments where maybe it could suit a little bit of music to try. Whilst these students may be a little bit more experienced at placing music to picture, I want to work on the presumption that maybe this is something you've never done before. So I'm going to show you in this next segment how to load the stuff into Logic. Obviously, if you use another DAW, you'll have different ways of working, but the principles and the theory behind it will be the same. Okay, so when you open your pack, you'll see 3 files. Let's start with the movie and talk you through that. When you put it into Logic, it says open the movie and extract the audio from the track. Do this, otherwise you won't be able to get rid of the audio embedded in the film. So what we have here is a countdown clock into the movie. As is standard practice, you get a sync plop 2 seconds before the movie starts. And here is what we call BITC, B-I-T-C, or burnt-in timecode. This gives you a sync reference on the film, which you must match with your own timecode counter. So in your Logic project, make sure you can see beats and time large, and that'll give you a timecode. So we've got hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. This is also known as SMPTE or SMPTE, which stands for the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers, I believe. First thing to do is check that your DAW is running at the same frame rate as your movie. Now these differ. Film tends to be 24, TV in this country tends to be 25, and if you're Peter Jackson, it could be 60 frames per second. Nutter. So what I'm going to do is first check the frame rate of the movie. So let's just zoom in and just move along frame by frame. So we've got 0 there. The frame before is numbered 24. And because the frames start at 0, not 1, that means it's 25 frames per second. So I'm going to open up the synchronization window, which is Project Settings, Synchronization, and you can see we're matching. So that's great. Right, next thing we need to do is spot the movie. We need to place it at the correct time code. So what I'm going to do is go to the beginning of the movie, or just before, Control click, go to Movie Project Settings. So let's put this same time code that you find in the BITC into the movie position. So 09, 59, 52, 00. Why are we starting our picture at 10 hours? Well, this is standard practice for telly, but for film, which tend to be separated into reels, each reel will sit at a different hour. So reel 1 at hour 1, reel 6 at hour 6. Right, so that's great. But now we have a whole hunk of dead time at the beginning of our sequence. So what we want to do is basically position Logic so that is also starting at 9 hours, 59 minutes, 52 seconds and 0 frames. And then boom, there we go, back to the beginning of your DAW's session. Okay, so let's just check out this sound that we've extracted from the video. So it's got a combination of composers whose passion for music, of dialogue and of music. We want to separate those two out, and hopefully your edit would have sent you separate sound files, which is kind of standard practice at the moment. So you get a fully mixed version, which is a great reference for all departments, and then specifically for the sound departments, you get it split out. Often it'll be 3 files: dialogue, sound effects, and the music, the temp score, all of that stuff. So let's just pull these 2 files in. I'm going to create new tracks, and you'll see that conveniently they also have a sync plop. So there is a visual cue to where these need to line up. And I suspect if we go to events and view as time, if we were to put our time code in there, that'll all line up beautifully. And we can listen as well for any flams, that kind of stuff. Boom. Okay, what you'll notice here is when it imports the audio, it locks it. I'm going to do the same with these two, and that is lock sympty, which is what I mentioned earlier, lock sympty position, which will mean you won't be able to move these files. They'll always go back to their position. Let's get rid of this audio. We no longer need it, and there we go. In a minute, we'll get on to the spotting session, but first I want to discuss with you and the students what I believe to be 5 cardinal rules of media composition. So let's just quickly talk about the job of being a media composer versus being a composer. Now, being a composer is more of an activity. Turning it into a job is something entirely different. Now, if you turn being a composer into songwriting and becoming a pop star, your job will be being a pop star, and a very, very small part of that will be composing. Now, for me as a media composer, a tiny fraction of that job is actually composing. So the main cardinal requirements of a media composer is to write to picture, to write to brief, to write fast because you will be working to a deadline, to deliver legal broadcast quality masters. So there will be basically delivery requirements that will be required of you. That will be your contractual responsibility to deliver those. But also, if you go sampling a drum break from the Rolling Stones and putting it in your film score, you will be legally liable to that. So you need to basically provide a legal broadcast quality master that is copyright clear. You've written everything. You've not used illicit samples, that kind of stuff. And then the 5th cardinal rule of media composition is to deliver it on time and on budget. Now, today, we don't have a budget, so I don't get any bills for you booking the London Symphony Orchestra. There is a 6th rule, but we're going to come back to that next week. Now, you may guess it, but I can tell you that what the rule isn't is to compose good music or to spend much time composing at all. Provided what you come up with is composed by you, it is an absolute fragment, a tiny part of what we do. And I think what's really important when working as a media composer is if you can bring your artistry as a composer to the table, that's great. But it is a bonus. I really have to accentuate that fact. I'll often take a series and think this will be my opportunity to really win some awards, maybe an Ivor Novello, where I'm judged by my peers, etc., etc. And the director will go, honestly, if we could do without music, I'd have this without music. So I'm just looking for drones, at which point you just basically throw away your award ambitions. So good music may not always be required of you. So basically, I've been fired as a composer. This happens. And I think what you're going to be up against is coming in as the cavalry. Now, we rarely get much time to work on these things because basically what happens is there's a long production process and everything goes over schedule. And this is your time's getting squashed and we run out of... there's always very little time to work. So writing fast is really important. But what you'll find will happen at the beginning of your career is that the point at which people really stick their necks out to employ someone who is less experienced will be the point at which they can't get anyone on board because it's really short notice. So it'll be people who are at a stage in their career where they're less busy. And this is exactly what's happened to me. My first working title film that I composed was me coming in as the cavalry. So this is why there's not going to be a huge amount of time to write it. So I've got an email from me as the director, and what I'm going to do, me in person, is interpret with you what that director is actually trying to say. And if you have any questions for me, I'm just going to basically talk to you as a composer helping, not as the director, because I'm presenting you with a scenario where you get an email from a very busy director who may be off the picture, maybe off the show, i.e. not being paid anymore, and therefore is not available to give direction other than this email. It happens. Alongside the movie and sound files in your download pack, you'll also receive a link to a Google Sheet. This is a cue sheet with spotting notes for the video. All composers have some kind of version of this, which has evolved to satisfy their workflow over the years. So on my one, we have the cue ID and the cue name. Typically, my files will be named using both these inputs. We have then spotting notes provided by the director and my notes in production notes. We then have a timecode or SIMPT in, so the start point of the cue, then out, which is when it needs to be finished by. Then this fancy formula calculates the running time, which is crucial because it is this that tells us how much we have to write and how much we have to record, making this a pivotal document in the creation of any score. I then have some other checkboxes that help me keep on top of how I'm doing, but I won't go into those today. You may or may not know that music is separated into cues, which are basically or otherwise known as starts. Now, it can be literally a stab that goes bang, or it could be a 20-minute chase sequence. So that is how we organise it. So the director has the linguistics here and has basically just self-titled them Q1, 2, but hasn't provided any time codes. So we're going to have to ascertain from his descriptions the time codes that he's talking about and stuff. So the purpose of this is to take his notes, maybe make some notes of our own. So what we'll do is we'll have a cue number. What's a really good practice as a composer is to have a kind of a code for the production that you're working on. So I hope that I'll be doing more Edinburgh College stuff, so I'm just calling this 2021 for now. Underscore 1M01. M stands for music, 01 stands for cue. I put 1M there. That will often indicate the episode or indeed the reel, and it's just a force of habit that I put a prefix there. Then we'll have a name of the cue, and these two will go up to make your file title when you create those cues. Then I'm going to have his spotting notes, and then any notes that I may make. What we're going to do is we're going to move through, and I think that what you'll see is that writing to picture is both a deeply linear process, but unlinear in basically where you start and where you finish. For me, it's kind of like writing a song. You know, the chorus may come first, but the chorus doesn't happen at the beginning of the song unless it's a Motown track. So often, maybe writing the verse, middle eight, the intro will come out of order, if you know what I mean. And I think that where starting a film is concerned, very little is stated in the opening acts of a film. Usually your big, full exposition of the music, the themes, will happen towards the end. So for me, it's all about working through this spotting process to find the hooks that can then be foreshadowed in previous cues, because they rarely come in the first cue. Indeed, you know, so many films will start with just a drone, and the score won't be a droney score at all, but it's like an intro to a song. So let's start with cue 1, and let's just find the picture there. Piano book this week. I want to talk about piano drops. I wish we could just give them more of a sense of occasion. Piano drop. Piano drop. So Q1, the director says, yuck, I think this is a prime example about why I hate this score. Lazy, lazy, lazy. It sounds like a Tony Scott film circa 1998. Whilst I want epic, cinematic, a sense of occasion, I don't want lame MIDI orchestras and ostinato strings, even though there weren't any in that example. Help! Please give me something that I've never heard before. Be daring, but make sure it's big. Every single job that you will work on, they'll go, I want to hear something entirely new that I've never heard before. But this is a real example to show your voice and to really go for it. Now, if I have any suggestions, I suspect the director, and this is me just thinking as a composer, will probably miss those accents. And in fact, you'll see that there's kind of one missing in the temp. There. So I would be mindful of those. Let's call this opening. And then what I'm going to go is say go for it, but also maybe mark the big cuts. I think, judging by his comments, that he's happy with the start point and the end point. So let's just find the start point.
Piano drop.
Okay, so I'd say it's probably about maybe 13 frames. And let's find the out point. You'll see that a little error happens there until we give it the out point.
For our fellow music.
So that's kind of the out point. So there we go. It's basically a 9-second cue there, and you'll be able to work out your totals from this. And this is a great way of basically gauging your workflow. So you know at the end of this spotting session how many minutes and seconds of music you've got to write, and then basically how long you've got to write that in. And that will give you a really good way of knowing whether you're on schedule or not. Okay, so let's move to the next cue. Cue 2.
Piano Book is a community of like.
So what he's saying is, after piano drop, I think this starts a bit early. Possibly a good cue point would be as the book comes to rest on its neighbour. So let's see where that is. So it started there, but he thinks later. So I think that's where he wants it there. So let me just go in and grab, might as well. So we're going to grab it right as the book does a little bounce. So it's going to be that point there. Maybe, yeah. So that's frame perfect. Okay, so after piano, I think this starts a bit early. Possibly a good cue point would be as the book comes to rest on its neighbour, which we've noted. For me, I actually like this cue, which is the only cue that I didn't write. He really doesn't like me at all. But I'd like it to be more part of the tapestry of the score, so not just a piece of needle drop. Now, this is the point I was talking about earlier. We don't know really what the tapestry of the score is. We haven't got our hooks yet. So we need to think about this cue, think back to it as we move through spotting it. It touches on sentimental, so go no further than this. If indeed you can pull me back from the brink of cheese, I don't think I'd mind. I prefer if it came to a natural rest, not a fade, please. So whilst he likes the music, he feels it's like on the edge of sentimental, so we don't want to go any more sentimental than this. So maybe don't get your strings out or your harps and stuff. And you can hear, I mean, again, when looking at a piece of temp that the director likes, we can talk about, well, what are the elements in there? Very simple.
Piano Book is a community of like-minded composers whose passion for music is matched only by our passion for sound. So much
repetitive.
We share it. Over 300 instruments free for our fellow music makers to use in their productions, alongside over 800 music tracks that demonstrate their potential.
A great new way of browsing this treasure trove of sounds is our Instagram page. If you haven't followed that yet, well worth doing. Not only can you see all the instruments there, but actually if you go into them, unmute. Great. So I would say that it's repetitive, it's hypnotic, it's simple, it features a piano quite heavily. So if they're saying they like something, this is something to grasp onto. I'm not saying this is your hook per se, but this is a point where you've got a bit of a clue. So I think observing, not copying the temp, but observing those notes will be interesting. So he wants this to come to a natural end. So this currently fades out.
Instruments there, but actually if you go into them, unmute.
So we need to be out by then. Probably find a natural endpoint somewhere earlier. There we go. So that's a good 33-second cue, that. Great. Let's move along to cue number 3, which I think,
whenever you have a spare moment, if you can browse Instagram, you can browse Piano Book.
What I love most about the Piano Book, that's a lovely music editor. That's very, very common. You see those terrible music edits that will happen in an edit suite. They'll just completely ignore the music. Okay, so this is for after playing the sounds. Okay, for me, this is too sentimental. So it's actually the same piece of music as before, but it's just, I think that he wants it to move on. So it can relate to Q2, but also have a bit of anticipation, like something exciting is about to happen. Now, a trick that I would maybe do here
is to possibly modulate what you did before. I'm a big fan of taking up the minor third. As some people like going up the semitone. Taking up a minor third is quite a good idea, but also maybe adding some kind of propulsive momentum to it. So maybe a pulse or something. Add a pulse or something. Maybe modulate. Just suggestions here. After sounds. Similar language to the director. So let's just find the endpoint for that. Whenever you have a spare moment. If you can. So it's just kind of whenever, somewhere around there. So these are one of these kind of loose cue points. You're not kind of hitting any moment in screen. Okay, and then let's find out where that ends. About the piano book community is it hears beauty in everything and anything, whether it be a rusty gag with every... What's kind of handy about receiving these files like this is you can actually really see the job that's ahead, if you know what I mean. So we can see where it comes out. Time for an introduction. So that's a good end. To sampling is to find that beauty and to draw it out. Time for an introduction. Again, this is me speaking as a composer. We kind of pick up on the rhythm of speech and stuff like that. I'd say it's possibly a little bit close to time for an introduction. It's almost like it should have died away by that point. To sampling is to find that beauty and to draw it out. So to sampling is to find that beauty and to draw it out. Time for an introduction. If you know what I mean. So we're well clear of time for an introduction. I'm going to put that as a little note. Maybe be well clear of time for introduction. Okay, so that's that cue. So let's move on to the next cue, which we can see here. But let's just get a little bit of context. Tool. It's time to bring out the GIMP. A vintage Broadwood made especially for John Cuthbert's. Okay, so it's kind of a screwed up version of Trois Innocents by Eric Satie. What did the director have to say? Meet the GIMP. I think this comes in late. Time to bring out the GIMP. Half a breath, then boom, in. So we'll look at that in a sec. Okay, big general note here. Whilst I like this piece by Eric Satie, it's used to death in media, so can we please do something original? Maybe using an old piano or something. I'd like a sense of this old thing soon meeting its maker. This cue is too horror for me. It should be almost like a lament. So I think the what he's saying is kind of, instead of creepy, sad. So sadder, less creepy, a little bit of empathy for the piano as a character, because as you know, we mistreat the character madly. Character. Now, for your convenience, this video is also about making samples. And if you go to this kind of side hustle I have called Piano Book and search for the GIMP, I've actually sampled this piano. Now, regrettably, it's only available for the full version of Contact, but one of the processes that I would recommend if you really want to use these sounds is you can mock it up with another piano and then use Contact in demo mode and just quickly bounce down the audio would be what I would suggest there. But basically, there are two versions. There's the flannel version and the GIMP version. And the flannel version, you'll see in a minute, may become useful. Okay, so let's go back to those spotting notes. So let's find the in point. So he wants it a bit earlier to bring out the GIMP. And he wants a little beat before the GIMP. Maybe as I put my key in there. Tool. It's time to bring out the GIMP. There. Might be fun. And then let's find the out point. Appropriate to rescue it and see this piano off with more of a dignified bang. And when I say it's had the again, I feel that we could have been out maybe a tad earlier, so the tempo could have been a bit faster to get me out if it's that kind of tempo that you're going for. So I'm just going to mark that. Okay, you don't have to be massively accurate on your spotting sheet. It's just basically an aid memoir for you, really. It's good to note when they want real kind of exact frame accurate stuff done. Okay, so that's another 29 seconds there. So we're looking at, so far, nearly 2 minutes of music with 4 cues. Okay, next cue, home bass, which I suspect is over the home bass section. We thought we'd go and get some tools. Okay. So I don't think we need to concentrate on that because I've just cast my eye on what the director said. For me, this cue is about as wrong as it gets. We can have some fun here. Could it be a bit? It could be a bit Ennio Morricone, so it could be a little bit like could be a bit lock stock. I don't know. But I don't want a collage. I want it to be of our world. Keep this running all the way until we're inside the studio. So I think that basically what's happening is we kill the music here and then bring it back here. So I think he wants it to be a single piece of music. So let's just watch it with the sound off. Some tools. Problem is it's yeah, because it's in slow motion. I think you can fall into the trap of being slow, but I think it could be quite up tempo. Some tools. Maybe a big boom on the feet hitting.
Tin snips.
I think
that sounds good.
What the director's getting at is this. I think this is meant to be a funny section, and the music kind of sets up for taking this seriously. And actually, this is quite comedic.
And I think we're going to need some safety goggles as well. Just thinking more. And I have the sense I can do something with this too. We definitely need some goggles. Can we get a bag as well, please?
That's all we need now. So I think that actually the way of making this funny is to actually tacit some of the words and almost chapter mark it. So let me just copy these notes from the director and make just a few suggestions for us as a team. So home base, some tools. Music.
Tin snips. Yeah, that sounds good. And I think we're going to need some safety goggles.
So maybe try tacit, don't know if that's how you spell it, or silent on some of the rather ridiculous suggestions being made. Try and modulate and landscape the different moments. Have fun. And then
goggles as well. Just thinking more. And I have the sense I can do something with this too. We definitely need some goggles. Can we get a bag as well, please?
So all we need now is a place to record
So
just keeping the music running all the way. This temp he doesn't like. So this should be a continuation of whatever we were doing over home base.
Stuart, it's lovely to see you again.
And then out by
How are you doing?
The temp, it spills over because it's not particularly doing much as score. So I think that we need to get out a little bit earlier. Run music all way, but get out earlier than temp and ignore the temp. So the temp is not giving us any favours there. Just going to find the in point as well. We thought we'd go and get some tools. I would suggest that it starts on picture. Would suggest it starts on picture, but downbeat on footstep. So I'm just going to mark that and show you where I'd put it. Tools. Okay. There. So it's a 38-minute cue. It's 38 seconds. So I'll give you guys a heart attack. Don't do that in a week. Sixth cue. Let's have a listen.
4006s just to capture everything, really, in the nicest possible way.
It's the closest I've come to it, like literally feeling. Okay, so we've got a bit of.
Front panel's going to be on or off when we're sampling it, and then in the.
Bit more of the Eric Satie. So, does he want it? Again, Eric Satie, no! Can we go from his playing in the room, but not this piece, to something more cinematic? Stop before the words, oh God. So let's just copy that in. So this is like one of the traps that I've set for you. So obviously there is a moment where you see my fingers. This is one of the tricks of the trade that we have to learn is, and I'll show you how I'll go about doing that in a minute, once we've spotted it.
Position, depending on whether front panel's going to be on or off when we're sampling it. And then in the room, I'd put up a pair of DPA 4006s just to capture everything, really, in the nicest possible way.
It's the closest I've come to. Keep it going, keep it going, keep it going.
Right, okay, here we go.
Keep it going.
is 2 hours of Broadwood fun.
Keep it going.
Oh, God.
Okay. So I think that possibly we're coming out on the... Boom. Somewhere around there. And let's just quickly find the start point. It's round here roughly.
Front
It
panel.
kind of fades up. So just have something gradually coming in there. So it's 30-seconder, 37-seconder. And I think basically what he's suggesting is you make it feel like it's in the room and then it goes into your cinematic space, which may mean you could use reverb and introduce more elements. At the point where I stop playing. So that's kind of quite a fun aperture shift for you to try, kind of going from being diegetic, as in seen on screen, playing something. And this is an example of where you can use an out-of-tune piano to fake what I'm actually playing. And you can mess around with like the room reverb and all of that kind of stuff to make it sound like. So CH, let's call it sample session. Great. Not far now. So you'll see that there's music here. But we don't want that to be replaced. That's true diegetic. So it's part of the soundtrack. And, you know, when they're doing like cue sheets to work out who gets the publishing, those will be included in the cue sheets, but you won't be listed as the composer. So let's look at, prepared piano montage. Okay, it's diegetic playing with flannels. Warmth. So I thought we'd really kind of go into, so it's kind of around here. I'm going to put this in here, and I know that there's a question mark over this. Diegetic playing with pianos. I think I'll maybe allow this as is, but if you can come up with an alternative, I'd be happy to give it a go. When they say that, I would always just give it a go. Always. So many times they will suggest something but not insist upon it. And then you'll get a call and you'll be literally at home base and you'll get a call. They'll be in the dub and they'll be going, I asked you if you could give me an alternative. Where's that alternative? So I think it's well worth doing. And you may find as we come out of the Eric Satie using it so much that really there won't be any purpose for it. Again, the flannelled version is down there. So you could use that version if you wanted to. Okay, so this is flannel session. And try something that thematically relates to your score, would be my suggestion as a fellow composer. Can't see the fingers. And here it is. So that's good.
The GIMP.
So well, there's just a little bit of motion there. There. So I would very much mark that as a cue point, and I'll show you again how to do that in a minute. And here it is, the GIMP out by then. Next up, prepared piano montage. So that's this section here, not for the drop. Which is, and he's saying that prepared piano, I'm happy to go with the needle drop. Needle drop is the term for, we often call it source music. Source music isn't actually correct. Source music is when there is a source to it. So if there is a jukebox in a restaurant or a radio, or maybe, I don't know, they're in a shop where there would be music, that's called source, as in it has a source within the scene. It's meant to sound like it's in it. When you just put a piece of music that isn't score, they call it needle drop. Very old-fashioned word, that. So I'm not going to put that on the cue sheet. Okay, so you'll see there's music here, but it's actually from that. So again, you don't need to worry about anything there. So I think it's just the last cue. We have to start with a piano piece of some sort, but then let's just go full on. Doesn't have to be comedic or knowing. Just give me more of your excellent epic cinematic, but no MIDI orchestras or ostinato strings. So after the piano drop, I like the solo piano, but again, not Eric. Should be some form of lament. So this is I've already faked the piano on that. That isn't diegetic sound. That is actually already me working as a composer. So again, I'll show you how I'd go about syncing that. Let's just find the in point, final sequence, in point. As a final thought for the spotting session, when thinking of like the hook, I think the hook is home base. He mentioned a couple of things, Ennio Morricone or Guy Ritchie, and I wonder if that is not the hook. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the film Snatch, but you could almost imagine maybe a Guy Ritchie piano drop. As a suggestion, that could be your hook. And if you think that could kind of inform the action sequence, this sequence, the home base sequence, and then your final sequence, just as an idea. But I personally, if I was to start composing this, I would probably start on the home base sequence. If you play it straight, so you don't play for the comedy, it's got a kind of an edginess to it. I think that you'll find that that may suit the top and the tail, and your whole kind of score can emerge from that. So that's, I think, the hook. So I'm just going to write a little note. Consider the hook, the sound, the language of your score to be possibly rooted in what you do for home base. If you find your language in the home base sequence and get it so it is actually, the straighter you play the music and the more you let me, or my character or whoever, me say, give me a trowel, we're definitely going to need goggles, all of that kind of stuff. If you find the kind of the right ingredients there, I think that you'll find that'll balance the top and the tail of the movie as well. I think that you'll find that that'll be the right spirit. It's slightly tongue-in-cheek, but played very straight. And what makes it funny is how absurd it is what's being depicted there. My suggestion would be to possibly start building the home base sequence as your first cue. I would call up the instruments you want to use, get the band together, find the piano sounds that you want to do, and create what I refer to as a template from which all of your cues should derive. I think in this day and age, we have, with stuff like Piano Book and Labs, access to terabytes of options. And I think what's really important for the cohesion of a score is to kind of give yourself restrictions. So you're relying on composition, not just an awesome sound that you use once in one cue. So that's what I always do, is go, okay, I'm going to choose these 8 instruments. That's all I'm going to use. And then also, this is part of how to make sure your process is as fast as possible. If every cue is like a totally different thing that you have to mix, different selection of instruments, it's going to take you that much longer.
Okay, so we've spot the session, and now I want to talk to you about how I would work using cues, again, in Logic. Your workflow may differ in different DAWs, but regardless of that, you may find the principles I use here useful.
Okay, working with cues and a master template. As I mentioned before, I'd get together the band and make that the master template. So what I'm going to do here is just going to load one instrument in that I'm going to use. Let's find a piano. I'm going to use my triple felt piano from Piano Book. Just a band of one instrument. I'm going to save that as my master template. Eddie Cole 2021, Logic, along with the audio files. Great. So that's the master file. Now, how do I work with cues? Well, let's just show you how I'm going to line up with that end cue with me playing the piano. here. Great. We know that this is Q1M08, so I'm going to do a save as Eddie Cole 2021. I'm going to save it into the same folder as 1M08. There we go. And let's find our start position. This is on a fade up. We can just see me playing there, but I don't think that we're going to catch it. I want to start on that cue there. So that is when the piano notes are going to sound. So what I'm going to do is simply chop these bits of audio, and let's say we're going to start on bar, I don't know, say 10, because this is not going to be the beginning of the cue. The cue's going to kind of seep in, and then we're going to hit that cue point. And I'm going to delete that first event there and type in that time code, and that'll move down to the beginning of your session. Let's mute off that for now. And let's just have a look at it with the old click. That's great. But what I'm actually playing is on the offbeat. I'm also definitely not playing at that tempo. So I'm going to make it 100 BPM, and I'm actually going to make it the second beat of that bar. It's good practice for when you move further on in your career, exporting stuff like MIDI files, which are really important for Pro Tools and orchestrators. If you don't have a tempo event position at bar 1, it makes it all screwy. Trust me. Okay, so let's have a little go at this. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 bars before. Let's imagine that's the end of the cue. So what I'm now going to do is bounce that down to audio. It doesn't need to be that long. Make sure that your click is off and your dialogue is off. There we go. We're not adding it to this project, and we don't want any normalization off, and I'm bouncing it offline. Great. It's named it for me already. You can see that some protocols are forming. File management is absolutely crucial for multi-episodic, multi-cue projects like this. Let's save 1M08 and return to our master template. And I'm going to simply import that into a fresh audio track. Now I'm just going to call this A, and I'm going to duplicate that. And this is called checkerboarding. So if we have more than one cue and they overlap, you can overlap between them. So this is your master document here. So then all I need to do is Control-click on the file and move to recorded position. And then let's have a look at that. So this time I'm going to mute the music, but keep the dialogue. So, time for the grand finale. Aberdeen, 60-foot crane, one who's had a good life, but went out with a bang. Hey presto, and basically that's my process. I do it in a series of passes, so from early sketches to get an idea of the thematic arc and whether things are repetitious, that kind of stuff, before getting into the nitty-gritty of production. It also gives you a feel for the piece. You get a sense of your own rhythm, and it helps you manage your time. You know, that's actually only going to take me an hour to do tomorrow, so maybe I will go to bed tonight. Until eventually I have a master session that is built up with loads of different cues, and I bounce that out both maybe as audio files for the edit, but also, crucially, a reference video for the director, because he'll probably want to watch it on the train, listening to it out of laptop speakers. It happens. And just for you Logic users, this is how you go about doing that. Go to Movie and export audio to movie. I like to make it 24-bit. Let's be generous. First pass is what I'll usually write. Really important to put the date. When you're exchanging stuff back and forth and maybe a director goes, oh, you haven't done that revision, you can say, can you just tell me the date on the movie that you're watching at, just to check he's actually looking at the right one, 10th of the 10th of the 10th. and save. And I'm not going to do that now because it's going to process that file, which takes a little while. And that's basically my workflow. But everyone says they can imagine stuff, but I don't know if you've ever used like a taster pot in painting your room, and you paint like a little patch like that that's yellow, and then you really think you can imagine, and then you paint your whole room yellow and go, it's yellow, it's terrible. Whilst directors say that they can imagine these things, the better that you represent your music, the better you have of getting stuff signed off. So final bit of the process would be to drag all of your cues in and do a little bit of a dub. Make sure the bits of music that they want, i.e. the prepared piano sequence, is intact, and indeed that any things of like diegetic moments are also intact. What's kind of important is to make sure that you check your movie before sending it off, even though you've checked it in Logic. Just check that it's all intact. But it's good just to watch it in a run, as we call it, which is the bits that don't have the music in, to get a sense of, is the music too repetitive, too overbearing? Is there too much of this sound? Does it have a sense of, am I enjoying the music when it comes in? That kind of stuff. That's it. So, you've seen that I'm not really spoken about composition at all, because it really isn't. It's just such a tiny part of our job. I've written an entire film score on literally a phrase that goes E, E flat, D. Da, na, 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 na. The whole score has sprung from that. So it took me seconds to compose something as brutally as simple as that. But that is the hook on which the rest of the score hangs. There we go.
Hiya, Christian.
Hi, Robin.
Thanks very much for the workshop. I was really looking forward to it and really, really enjoyed you going through things there. I kept thinking back about what you were saying about a hook. Maybe it's just me not getting it clear, but is it essentially a musical idea, a sort of motif that runs throughout the film that everything else revolves around, and is it the instrumentation of that idea as well?
I don't know if I ever think of a musical idea in my head, but the ideas that happen when I'm on a walk are concepts. And for me, it's something you can literally hang your hat on. It's a hook you can hang your hat on. It's like, okay, I think the secret of this score, personally, as a composer, you may feel differently. The secret of this score lies in the home bass sequence. You get that right, I think it should inform the rest of the score. That's where the spirit is. If you look at, say, Hans Zimmer, he writes the most wonderful scores. And, for example, I think my favourite score of his, from a musical composition point of view, is Gladiator. It's the most beautiful melody, but he doesn't always write kind of melodies that are hooky, but he'll always hook you, and it'll be that thing that kind of makes a score spark, pop. It'll be a concept often. So I know on like Dark Knight, I think it was this distorted cello sound. Obviously there was the organs on that one, the spacey one with Chris Nolan. Do you know what I mean? So when I say hook, it is something that is like that. It is something that hopefully gets your audience, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a riff or a theme or a leitmotif.
Yeah, I was just wondering what your process would be when it comes to instrumentation, how you choose your instrumentation. Is it based on narratively what you can see on the screen or not?
Well, I think it's got to feature pianos. So I think that we know that we've got to find some pianos, and I would probably put them quite front and center. And then, as I'd say, I'd find my hook or my route in, and for me it's the home bass sequence. So one way I might go is I might go Fistful of Dollars and try something like, okay, something I might go for a little walk and go Fistful of Dollars, Guy Ritchie. What about a breakbeat version of Fistful of Dollars with massive kind of synths that go, bah, give you your kind of epic? That just is off the top of my head. That's my route in. So what I would do is, it's just like starting a track, is go, okay, here's a sequence. I'm going to start writing it. Okay, now I'm going to pull up some basses. I'm going to pull up some tubas. Don't. No, I'm joking. Whatever you want. I'm going to pull up some tubas. I'm going to distort them. Could pull up a breakbeat. Going to pull up maybe some whistle samples or whatever. Maybe a glockenspiel that's distorted. Build up that arrangement. And then I would think about the rest of the piece and go, well, I think that this will probably get me to within 10 yards of the checkered flag. I think there's probably going to be maybe some cymbals maybe that I might need that I don't have in this sequence, and I'm going to need maybe a half a pound of different piano sounds to work with the various different kind of piano cues. That's how I would build it up.
So sort of connected to what Robbie was saying, would you expect the music that occurs after the home bass sequence to be different to the music prior to the home bass sequence? Or would it just be led based on the visuals again?
What I'm saying is I think that it's almost like creating a virtual band or a sound world, sometimes people call it. And I think that the home bass sequence is where I would start. But I think the first time you're going to hear that virtual band is going to be the very first cue. So for me, the reason why I'm referring to the home bass sequences is I think that is going to unlock the secret to the score, personally. As a viewer, it's not going to be the first time you're going to hear that palette of sounds, if you will. And yes, the home bass sequence, I mean, I would follow the picture with that and then, you know, just let it simmer. I mean, I've laid loads of traps for you here, like me playing. There's a point where I'm talking to camera and you're meant to keep the music going. So you're going to find a way of carving your way around that, and then back up for castle sound, being aware there's a bit of dialogue there, all of that kind of stuff. When you're working, I would say I switch the dialogue off maybe 0.05% of the time. It's really frustrating to produce with a load of dialogue, people talking in your ear. We've all done it with noisy, drunken visitors to studios and stuff. But every minute you spend concentrating on the production and the levels with dialogue switched off is a minute spent creating something that's going to clash with your dialogue. I've done quite a few time watches, and the average age for someone watching a time watch, I believe, is 70. It's something that retired people are really into. And there's something that happens to the brain. It's not about hearing. And I'm experiencing it when you get to my age, 49. If you go into a very crowded restaurant and there's music playing and there's a lot of talking going on, and then someone's talking to you, you find it difficult. It's not that you can't hear them, you just can't make out what they're saying. What's happening is your brain is a really sophisticated set of filters that filters stuff out, and they just get a bit weaker. So what happens with Time Watch is they go, you mustn't have any music playing when any contributors are speaking on screen. So what you do is you write these cues and then you explode them out so they duck and literally duck to nothing under people talking, and then they'll go to a voiceover that will be very clear, which won't have kind of room ambience and that kind of stuff, and then you can run music bubbling underneath. But that's just an example of how you've got to be really, really careful about dialogue, particularly with factual entertainment.
Hi, Christian. Thank you so much for the workshop as well. My question is about the length of the cue.
Yep.
So once you've got like how long the cue is gonna be, like around 30 seconds and whatnot, do you do like any maths to go about like bars and tempo, or do you just play?
This is a skill that you will develop very quickly, and I don't know where it comes from, but I can watch a sequence and go, and you start hitting all the cuts, and basically editors of any worth, and again it's just a natural human instinct, will edit with some kind of pace in mind. So it's about feeling your way through it, really. But I would say that the best thing to do is to try and find a universal tempo for each of your cues, and not fiddle around with the tempos too much, not fiddle around with the meters too much. You know, I've had so many arguments with directors about what the music should and shouldn't be doing, usually via email. And what I realised is that the job of the music is to help tell the story. It's not to provide additional oomph to the sound effects. If you're doing that, you're just going to be in competition with them. So for me, it's providing a narrative that goes along with the narrative thread, and that's really important. Is it helping tell the story better? And that's what's bad about my score, is I've just kind of gone, that looks like a dingy, murky garage. It's my garage just around there. And so I'm going to make it seem creepy. But why? There's nothing creepy. There's nothing sad. This piano is basically going to get executed. And I think that we can play on the pathos, you know, make it sad. It's the crying clown. We'll make it seem that much more absurd. So I think what we're going to do next week is that I'll really love to focus in on some of your successes. There's going to be a final version to work against. And I just would say beware of the word locked.
Okay, so I'm going to be back in a week's time to show you the next part in the process, and there may be a surprise in store. If you want to take part, download the pack in the video description down below, and I would say give yourself a day, an 8-hour day, to try and nail it. If you'd like to upload your efforts, I'd really love to see how you're getting along. Use the handle #EddieCole2021 in the title or the video description of your YouTube video. Subscribe if you haven't done already, and ding that bell to be notified the next time I put a video up. See you in a week's time. One of those for luck.